Hey, this is gonna be a pretty early, I guess, late video. It's currently like 2:20 a.m., but I'm traveling to China this morning by God's grace, so gonna try and crank this video out now. But GPT-5 has released for a while now. I'm pretty late, but I kind of want to talk about the model, my thoughts, and why I think it's interesting. So just to get right off the bat, basically this model is a mixture of models, not a mixture of experts, but like a mixture of models. So think of the best way I can explain it is like inside the model, you have stuff like GPT-5 with thinking, GPT-5 without thinking, and then the model based on your query, your question, it routes to which models you use, what size of the models you use. Like with GPT-5 thinking, so you use like the mini version or should you use like the default main big version. So that's one of the core new innovations with GPT-5. It also helps with cost. So instead of someone using like a model that probably is more expensive for OpenAI, for something that they don't need to use it for, OpenAI says, "Hey, we got that for you." But there was kind of some backlash with that, so they can't release their legacy models back to GPT 4.0 and stuff like that. So people have more autonomy with that. But I think eventually they'll transition it out as time goes on. But in addition to that, it's also better encoding, more so on the front end. This kind of sucks 'cause I do more back end stuff. I was thinking when using this model, especially over the summer, it didn't really have help that much. Like I would try and use it for problems when it came to like the work I was doing with Retrieval, augmented generation, or using like want to keep that end to show the authenticity of making project flips, or using Streamlit applications to show quick coding demos or just different stuff like that, right? Especially when it came to backend though, OpenAI ChatGPT 5 wasn't as good as like Gemini 2.5 Pro, so I just stuck with Gemini 2.5 Pro if I want to make a quick overhaul change. But if I want to make a minuscule change or just want to use do something quickly, I used ChatGPT 5 because I prefer the UI. But in terms of coding, Gemini 2.5 Pro is definitely much better, especially when it came to backend stuff. But going on, it's also a safer model, has less hallucinations, and according to OpenAI, it's 80% less likely to contain a factual error than OpenAI O3, the O3 model. I think this is I can't verify the data, especially after their demo would have very interesting graphs, but I can say that this model definitely feels more accurate. I remember I was using it for a LinkedIn post based on a research paper, and there's certain details I didn't want to keep on go fact checking myself, so I was testing the model's ability to go fact check, and it was very accurate. And so far, my using of the model has not hallucinated. As far as I know, it's very I think it's very stern and disciplined when it comes to in that regard of making sure it's telling the truth. There is some guardrails and there's also pushback against that as well. Um, but all in all, vibe wise, it's pretty cool. It wasn't as crazy as I thought it was gonna be. I remember a while back, I think a couple months back, I remember I was the hyping up GT5. I thought it was gonna be like this crazy thing that's gonna change the game forever. I guess you could say it is changing the game, but it wasn't as crazy as I thought it was gonna be. I think there's two reasons for this. I think the first is hype, and the second is the edge of capabilities. In terms of hype, a couple of tech influencers before it was released had access to the model and they were hyping up, and these were some tech influencers I really trust their opinion. I know Theo T3, he was one who was hyping up. He made like a video I think day of or before the release. And he said I had it for a while and GPT-5 broke for me, and he went through his thoughts like using the model and how it was really good. And it's like really interesting. But then when it actually came to using the model, for most people, it didn't perform as well as expected based on that hype. And I think a large reason, I know on OpenAI's and that's just classic marketing. Like they're gonna hype their own product. Like that's what you have to do as a company. But I think when it comes to tech influencers, I think they just have more compute allocated per their request because it was a small sample size. So like they could afford to basically spend more on them versus allocating the same compute to billions of people is just not reasonable at all. So I think that's the difference. I think that's something should have been mentioned more. Because I remember when I was using VO2, I got early access to VO2's Google's video generation model. I remember thinking, like, okay, this model is really good, but then a reason it's probably really good is because not that many people are using it as of now. Versus when it actually released, I think the quality did decrease. But I think by a small amount though. But like it still did. It was a noticeable difference in my using of the model. So that's why I think the hype didn't accurately play out into reality. I do think that kind of sucks. I think you have to reasonably hype your products sometimes. Um, Well, so I think the second thing when it comes down to it is that most average users aren't pushing OpenAI's models to their fullest capabilities. So, like, I would argue most people are tackling relatively simple to medium slash hard challenges, but not a novel problem that GPT-4 couldn't solve with the right guidance. Like for my use cases, like there were times when I would use GPT-4 and it wouldn't solve a problem, but like if I really want to use it and continue guiding and continue engineering my prompt, GPT-4 could probably have solved the problem, right? Or if there was more compute allocated to the quest, like yeah, for tech influencers. But so when GPT-5 comes out, I'm still not gonna be pushing GPT-5 right now with the work I'm doing. I'm still not gonna be pushing it to its capabilities. So I don't know the actual difference between GPT-4 and GPT-5, because even though their capabilities like times five, right? I was never at the capability. I was never at that edge of capability in the first place. So to me, it's like, okay, that's cool. Like it can do more stuff, but I'm actually making the most use of that more stuff, and that's why I think most people can feel the difference. Because I do think it's an arguably, I think definitively maybe better coding model, but it's just like, you know what I'm saying? It's like it can make better demo games, but I was never making demo games in the first place, or it can do really cool front end stuff, or it can do this really, really well, but I was never doing that at that level because that's not something I'm doing at that level or something that's like worth doing in one go. It's more so like you're especially if you're working at a company, I imagine you're not just trying to make a website in one go, you're iterating on the website. So I don't know how many, that's another thing with use cases as well. But because like not many people are going to actually like when you actually need to make a website, you're not just gonna make a website in one go like that. It's just I think depending on who you are and your skills, I think it might just be easier to actually build it with the ground up, have a strong foundation, then use OpenAI or Gemini or Llama, wherever, to iterate on your thing. But continue from there. I think in contrast, image vision models are actually easier to see improvement because with an image vision model, it's really easy to see the capabilities and limitations of the model like immediately. Like for me, I just use like an IP like One Piece or Disney, and I make a very hard scene that not even very hard. Just think of something in my mind very simply, and I describe it to a T, so almost. And then once I do that, I can see where the image model fails. Like I remember a while back, they struggled with the hands a lot, so that was an easy thing to see the improvement on. Or they struggled with positioning, or with video gen models, they struggle with consistency, character consistency, or physics. So those are things to easily track. Cause like with a couple word changes, you can see the limitations of the model versus the code, and like the actual use cases, it's like hard to see like, oh, this is the big change. Like no one's making a Rubik's what's it called again? Rubik's Cube simulator. Like no one's doing that in their free time. So like if OpenAI ChatGPT 5 can do that a million times better than GPT-4, then it's like no one, it's like they're not going to feel it, right? I think the feeling is something that's under estimated when it comes to these AI models, because a lot of it there's, I'll get to that in a second, hopefully. But back to what I was saying. In contrast, image gen models are actually easier to see improvement. I think that's why I always get more hype for image gen and video gen models, because I can easily see that improvement. Like, oh dang, I can do this now, even though I'm not actually gonna do it. 'Cause I don't generate images in my free time. Um, I think a good analogy to kind of cap off that point though is that if your car can go up to 200 miles per hour, but you can only drive at 40 miles per hour, then the manufacturer suddenly upgrades the speedometer to 2,000 miles per hour, but you're still driving at that 40 miles per hour with your daily commute. You're not really going to notice the difference because you're not driving at the 2,000 mile per hour that you can do, right? So it makes no difference to you. But kind of going back to my thing with the feeling being something that's so underestimated with these AI models. With a lot of companies, I would say there's kind of a lock-in effect where it's like, okay, if you use this for a while, you're going to continue using it, whether it's your rewards or your data, your actually data is going to be something interesting in a second, your data or just your convenience with it. But with AI models, there's very low friction from switching from one AI model to another. And I think that's going to be something that's more, I think that's something they're probably thinking about now as the company is growing, more people use it, but then it's hard to like retain a reasonable user base if it's like if I can just like one day I'm like, okay, I'm tired of ChatGPT, let me go to Anthropic or let me go to Gemini, right? And that's why feeling is so important. So that's why I think even though I wouldn't say ChatGPT has the best coding models or best models. I think since it has such a nice user interface, I feel better when I use ChatGPT for general stuff, right? And I think that feeling is like really that locking effect. But I also think data is going to be something that's really important as well, because the more personalizable your AI is to you, then the more you're going to the more you're going to want to use the AI. So if my AI like ChatGPT 6 knows my schedule and knows what I like, it knows what I don't like, it knows my strengths and weaknesses, and can keep track on how I'm improving on those, I'm much more inclined to use that model than start all over again with using Gemini or Llama or Claude, right? Because this one knows me the best, right? It's like making new friends or being in a relationship. I don't think those are the best ways to stay in friendships or relationships, but the thing applies because sometimes you stay within those relationships because starting a new one is just going to be much harder. I feel like that's very toxic, but you get the point. So I think that's probably going to be the future of how you retain a user base for AI companies. I think they're probably going to make it harder to like take your data to from one AI company to another. So I think if the U.S. and other countries were smart, they'll kind of make it illegal to do that, so you can increase competition. Or maybe if they're smart, that's maybe the wrong path to go on. I still struggle with this legal thing when it comes to AI, especially when it comes to fair use and all, with image gen and stuff like that. So I think legal is something I have to probably study up on more. But I think it's gonna be interesting. I think ChatGPT 5 was a pretty good model. I wasn't fully impressed, but I don't know what my full impression like. I don't know what fully impressed would even look like. Um, I think although I've been into image gen or video gen, I would have been able to say I'm fully impressed. But I think it's a good model. I think it's interesting. I think it's cool that they're using the routing thing. I think it makes it easier. I do think it's cool. In terms of some pushback though, since I have some time here, in terms of interesting pushback, I know the GPT-4 for a while was very had a sycophancy problem, like it glazed you basically. It just kept on praising you, and I was really not able to give you critical feedback and stuff like that. So I know they reduced down this model, and some people have some pushback. This model also has less personality. I'm guessing as a byproduct of that first decision with reducing the sycophancy. Um, but I actually think that's an interesting topic for like a debate. I would love to see that debated out because I don't know the right answer. I remember I was talking with my coworkers about this, and he made a really good point when it comes to air regulations and stuff like sycophancy. Essentially, you can't just like leave opioids on the street and expect people to give themselves the right dose. And I was like, initially, I was like, oh dang, are AI models like opioids? Are they that addictive? But I would argue they are. They can be, like, in their full potential, they can be. So it's really hard to say, like, oh, just let people be responsible adults and say, okay, this is getting too crazy, or I'm falling too in love with this AI model or something like that. So I think that's something I really want to see play out in more debates. But yeah, that doesn't really have to do. I guess it has to do with GPT-5 because they made that change, and I know some almond or did a tweet about that, and he was actually giving his actual deep thoughts about it. I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, I'm really excited to see how this whole thing plays out. It's such a cool field. I think if you're someone watching this 2 years in the future, like tomorrow or wherever, I really recommend, no matter what field you're in, whether it be AI, legal, medicine, or something, we just keep track of this field because it's something that I think plays a lot into different spaces. And it's just something fun to keep track of. And it has a lot of fun stuff going on. I know Elon Musk and some almond were having their beef a while ago, and that was pretty funny to see. But yeah, besides that though, I have nothing else to say. So have a great day.